thank you to everybody who's with us this afternoon and for taking the time to be with us and to join in our experiences. My name is Jose de Jesus, and I'm going to be one of your moderators along with Luis today in this short webinar that we're presenting to everybody. I work for Guidance and Giving. We're a Catholic fundraising firm working around the United States, focusing on stewardship and development, helping parishes and dioceses and schools to achieve their fundraising needs. And today I have the honor of being accompanied by 4 other colleagues who are going to be putting on this webinar. A couple of goals that we have before I go ahead and introduce everyone. Number one is we want to offer everyone that attends our webinar today some experiences and insights, lessons that we've learned along the way, and literally serving hundreds of parishes around the country. When the firm began talking about the possibility of doing these webinars, we had talked about, and set some goals for ourselves about what is it that people want to hear? What is the reality that we're seeing out there in working with our Hispanic cultures and parishes? And so what we said was, let's put together some webinars, a little series of about 3 or 4 of these, and see if we could respond to people's needs. So with this first webinar, our goal is to just give a view from about 30,000 feet up, and hopefully to inform and shape our paradigms about how to market and minister and collaborate with our dynamic Hispanic communities around the country. So by way of introduction, I'm privileged to work with a number of our directors who are with us today from our Hispanic division. Number one, I want to introduce Luis Tacuri, who's from Ecuador.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Luis. I've worked for GIG for over 5 years, serving diverse parishes in the Archdiocese of Newark, as well as the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Over the past 5 years of serving the Catholic community, I've learned a lot about the need to have to understand the people I'm serving to best serve them and accomplish their goals. Currently, I'm serving a few parishes in the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Thank you.
We have with us today also Brian. He's from Colombia, and he's helping us with our slides and keeping us on time. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Yeah, my name is Brian Bedoya. I've been with Guidance and Giving for about 5 years, over 5 years. Started in the Diocese of Oakland, then worked with a couple parishes in Los Angeles and San Diego. And I've been in Texas for the last 4 years, working with the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston and the Diocese of Ladero. And just like Luis also, we're working with a couple parishes, helping them maintain their social media, maintain a presence, an online presence in order to survive these uncertain times. Thank you, Jose.
Also with us from Mexico, we have Elisa Gonzalez.
Hello, everybody. I have been working with Guidance and Giving since 2018, serving the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. And I'm currently working with some parishes and also some schools implementing the Path Forward program.
Also with us, we have Jose Felix, who's also from Mexico, and he is going to be sharing us some of his insights as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jose Felix. Everyone calls me Pepe Nacho because my middle name is Ignacio. And I have had the privilege of working with Guidance and Giving for over 8 years. And I've been fortunate enough to work in every region of the United States. I'm also very lucky of San Diego out here in North County for a parish.
Thank you. We'll be hearing from some of our directors later on in our webinar today. Myself, I'm from the Dominican Republic. Our families came from the Dominican Republic in the 1970s, and I work with Guidance and Giving as well. I've been in fundraising for about 26 years, and most of that time I've spent with the firm. So it's a real blessing for us. I'm working right now on a number of projects, but currently I am in Diocese of Worcester, Massachusetts, and serving and working up here with a wonderful community. Some general housekeeping things before we get started. During the webinar, please feel free to ask your questions. We have a chat button in the bottom. You can use that button, or you can use the Q&A button. Luis will be gathering questions and fielding them at the end of the webinar. Also, please stay tuned because at the end of the webinar, we have a takeaway. So after the questions are finished, there's actually a small little part that we are going to be doing. So just like you're in church, don't leave right after communion, but actually hang out and wait till the final blessing before we leave. And finally, we look forward to your feedback. So one question at the end of the webinar as well, asking as a poll question to figure out if our webinar would be something useful to do in Spanish for our brothers and sisters in our Hispanic communities. We will be recording the seminar, and it's our intention to email it out, email the link out to everyone. Jose Felix will be discussing a bit later about some tools that he's used, and we're going to be emailing PDFs of that to everyone as well. And finally, when you get the email from us, there's going to be a 3-question survey. It'll take you about 16 seconds, maybe even less, to just respond to that. And that will definitely help us to figure out content and what is it more specifically that our participants want to hear from us. So with that in mind, those are our do's and don'ts. We're going to be getting underway here. And we're going to begin, as we do all things, in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please join with me wherever you are. As leaders, you have called us today to share and learn from each other. We ask for your grace and courage to engage the challenges that your church and our world face today. Open our eyes of faith that we might see others the way you see all of your children. Open our ears that we might hear the cry of the least of these. Open our hearts to allow your healing love to be our compassion in the world. Open our minds to help us always remember who and why we serve. May your Spirit help to bring certainty to an uncertain world. May we honor you with our ministry, and may our lives be a song of praise to your Son, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. I love this little meme that we open with here. And then Cucuy came and ate all the niños who wouldn't go Mimi. The end. Amen. The reason why I love this meme is because it speaks so much to our culture, and it speaks so much to how I grew up and what I like to call our religiosity. And religiosity is such a nice word, but all it really means is how we engage our faith, the things that we actually do in engaging our faith. Growing up in a Hispanic family, our faith was passed down to us from our mother for the most part. She was the primary transmitter of our faith. And Cucuy, in some cultures, cuco in other cultures, like where I'm from in the Dominican Republic, is another word that we use to mean Satan, right? And it's kind of interesting. But some of our religiosity, some of the things that we engaged in growing up really helped to shape how we lived our faith and who we are today. And one of them was, I remember during Holy Week in particular, on Good Friday, the silence in our house, right? There was, you weren't even allowed to speak, basically. And what my mom would tell us, again, with her little stories, was that, especially on Good Friday, Satan was out in the world and he would take all the bad kids away. And in fact, we wouldn't speak at all. It would be a silent house. And, at 1 p.m. we'd gather and we'd go to the Via Crucis, and we'd march and process in the streets. And the first words that we will utter basically on Good Friday was during the veneration of the cross, right, at the service. But the funny thing about it was that we were not the only family that did that. If you went around our block in particular, our family and all the children on our block did the same thing. And so it's important that we begin to understand and know how our faith was being transferred to us based on these the religiosity that we practiced. And I say that to us so that we can engage and understand this idea of being not just bilingual, and so that we can do our work in both languages, but also bicultural, and understanding that You know, we're entering into a culture. Beyond translation, and this topic and this webinar is focused around transferring of information, and something gets lost if we just delve deeply into when we translate things. I get the question sometimes about stereotypes, you know, and is it necessary? Is it something to engage in? And people ask that oftentimes nervously. And I say to people, don't worry about stereotypes. We all do them. We all have them. Stereotypes are just an extension of the brain's function to create shortcuts so that we could engage in life. So for example, if you're crossing the street, you're not going to stop and say, oh, the light is red and there's a car coming and all. No, you just take in the whole thing and you're able to say, I am in the process of crossing the street. And you do that subconsciously. And you can't stop but doing that because that's the way the brain learns. And so stereotypes in general are not a bad thing. We get into trouble when we introduce fear, when we introduce things like misinformation, jealousy, anger into those stereotypes, and that stereotypes now begin to form the basis of racism. And of course, that's another topic for another webinar. But just to be careful with that. My point here is that while stereotypes can be innocent and an extension of our capacity to learn, we've got to be careful. So then the question becomes, how do I inform those stereotypes? How do I inform those paradigms so that I can be a more accurate and a more effective fundraiser, a more effective pastor, a more effective leader, a more effective minister in my parish and in my diocese and in my church? The first thing I would suggest is that you examine your own views and your own department's views on how you are already engaging the Hispanic community in your parish or diocese. And I do that by asking one question or living by one paradigm, better said. And that's to begin with the end in mind. So for example, when I'm privileged to serve a church or a diocese, I make it my business to learn about the community and to learn specifically about the parish. What countries are represented in that parish? Where do they come from? Okay. What's the relationship with the pastor and the associate in particular? Intimately getting to know the community, it makes a very, very big difference. With the deeper understanding of the who are the ultimate receivers of my message or my case, then why not craft a message for support in Spanish right from the beginning to eliminate the need for translating? Our dioceses, our parishes, our communities are filled with people who are looking for an opportunity to serve. They think about them as co-conspirators in your mission. So begin with the end in mind forces us to ask the question, who belongs on this team? Who belongs on this team to make us better? Who are the co-conspirators that I need to help better serve? The team that you have before us, one of the things that we do and we engage in is when we're about to create brochures, letters, marketing materials for our clients, we don't begin in English, we begin in Spanish, because that's the end. Those are the people that are going to be receiving our message, and we tailor it to the audience. So over the years, we've learned that something does get lost in translation. The second thing I would ask is that you think of yourself and ask yourself, do I see my role as a leader as ministering to the Hispanic community or ministering with this community? The difference, although may seem subtle, but the implications are enormous. When we minister with, we are engaging in a collaborative work, collaborative ministry, and it's healthy. Recently, I was at a meeting with an Anglo pastor and a Hispanic associate serving a parish that is 80% Latino. It's very interesting, the dynamic between these two men. The Anglo pastor, in his mind, what he wanted to do, he wanted to make sure that we were able to get through the meeting, every item on the agenda. He wanted to also make sure that we had a direction and we had some takeaways, things that each of us need to do, who's gonna do what by when, right? We're familiar with that. For the Hispanic associate though, when we got through the meeting, his primary engagement was making sure that nobody was offended and making sure that everyone in the meeting participated. And engage in a very different way. Another suggestion is to analyze your motivation for your, Okay. So I have here two brochures. One is small and one is quiz. Which one of these is Spanish? Right. Use our materials and how we distribute our materials. Is it really just a return on investment? Oftentimes, a lot of our decisions are made economically, right? Well, how much is this going to cost? How much of a return are we going to get? It's important that I'm not saying not to consider the economic implications of your decisions. We have to, but weigh it differently. What's the priority? What is it that we want at the end? And the last thing I want to offer with regard to some of these insights is not to settle. Okay, not to settle. When we're making plans with our leadership and our committees and our dioceses and the parishes and schools, we want to reach for the win-win. We don't want the win-lose where I win and somebody else has to give something up, or the lose-win where I lose more than the other party has won. We want to go for the win-win. But then there's another option, and the other option is no deal, right? No deal. No, our case for support is not quite ready yet, right? No deal. If we're going to honor the people that we're going to work with, then we have to be willing to arrive at a no deal until it's ready. So the question is, the work is in progress. Our co-conspirators, our team is working on it, and we're going to get there. Translating is not the ideal anymore. Something gets lost in translation. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my brother, Jose.
From one Jose to the next, right? Always. So I want to start by talking about low expectations in the Hispanic community. And sure, it's a universal problem seen, mostly we see it in schools, low expectation from the teacher to the student. But in a sense, that dynamic is very similar with pastors and parishioners, right? And when we do this for parishioners, we're creating more of a divide, right? We're fall into a situation where it's them and it's what they do and it's their activities, the events that they put on, and then it's us, our community, and a more traditional sense, what we've always done before and what seems to work for us. So I want to ask, how often have you heard the following two statements? First one, the Spanish-speaking community is too poor to give. Right? Second one, it is not in the Hispanic culture to give or make a donation outside of the collection basket, outside of that $1, $2 in the collection basket. And although these ideas hold some merit, for how long? Why is it that we encounter the same problem with second and third generation parishioners who should know better, right? So therefore, the change shouldn't be relied on them. The change has to come from us. So it's not them as the multicultural community that we set aside. It's us as parish leadership. How are we going to internalize? How are we going to change our ways to best adjust our schedule and our plan for them? More often than not, during parish leadership meetings, our leaders will form this incredible master plan. And it solves the current problems of today and it looks into the future and gives us the vision where we're expected to go in 5 years from now. And as perfect as it seems, it has a huge flaw because the question, or I'm going to better put it, the afterthought is often, how do we implement this plan now with the Hispanic community? So instead of having an all-inclusive plan and starting with, like Jose said, the end in mind, we're already adjusting our plan and trying to morph whatever that Anglo-centric plan was into our Hispanic community or into our multicultural communities. And people are much smarter than we give them credit for. Our parishioners always know when they're in second place. So at this moment, you might be thinking, okay, Jose, yes, these are a lot of common problems and we face them, but how can I improve my parish or how can I improve my diocese, right? And my answer is starting from the leadership down. Again, I would like to offer you a challenge to analyze your own council meetings, to self-assess what you are doing currently. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a diocesan board meeting be it budget or pastoral, and no one at the meeting is representing either the Hispanic community, the Korean community at times. So why is this the case? We have to do a self-assessment. I'm going to ask Lou to go on to the next slide for some suggested questions. So here are some suggested questions that you can start off, or you can just give to your board members, pastoral council members, multicultural ministry members even. Do you believe this group ministry is representative of our community? Do you feel as though your opinion matters? How could we improve? Would you be willing to occasionally visit other ministries? And so self-awareness, just like in many things in life, is key. But I don't see that happening at the parish level, and I don't see it happening at the diocesan level. And why is that? If we do not self-analyze, if we do not self-assess, then how can we improve, right? Another suggestion, this might be more of a quick fix, something that we can do today at the parish level certainly, is instead of translating the bulletin, make a new bulletin for the Spanish community. And just like Jose was saying, this idea of creating and not translating, creating something that has the end in mind, that has our target audience attention. And this not only helps our parishioners, feel like their needs are being fulfilled and like, my parish is really looking out for me and what we're doing, but it also helps the parish office, because all of a sudden the parish office is more sensitive to the different needs. They start to internalize and realize that they have to do a few things different for that same message to be spread out to the community. And lastly, I'll ask Lou to show the card we used, or we've been using over the last couple of years to help us prepare for a pledge drive. We call it a Stay Connected card. And rest assured, just like Jose was saying, the slides will be presented at the end, and they will be shared with everyone that's on this call. But we use this, and it's been very effective the last 2 years, as you can see, because of various reasons. And in front of you, you have two separate cards. The first is obviously a little more complicated. It has name, address, a few more questions. The second's a little more simplified. And why we use this as preamble to pledge drives is for two reasons. Since the message from the pulpit is, please fill out this card today, and someone from the parish office will reach out to you to invite you to parish events, let you know how you can help. Having said that, parishioners are more comfortable giving their information away because they know that the parish office and only the parish office will be using it. It reminds them that the parishioner, that this information isn't going to go straight to, out into the world for anyone to see, but it's going to go straight to the parish office. Second reason is now the parish takes the first step, right? Instead of having our parishioners do the work of filling out a card, putting all their information down, filling out a pledge card, which already is a tough task in the Anglo community. This puts a precedent as our parish is now going to look out for my best interests, and our parish is going to put the first step in phone calling me if I want to help. And there I can share my information a lot easier and a lot more secure, because I'll be safe, because that person on the other line is either the secretary or a volunteer that I see at Mass. So now I finished my part. I'll pass it on to Elisa. Pass her the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm so happy to be sharing all of this with you. So I'm very grateful. I just want to say in the name of my team, thank you for joining this webinar. So these three icons that we are looking at right now, they represent one insight. We're going to go through our insights and try and see if we can switch our paradigms to better serve ourselves and our communities. So the rainbow, I would like for all of you to take 16 seconds to close your eyes and think of the last time you saw a beautiful rainbow Maybe it was in a beautiful mountain, maybe it was in the ocean. Just think of the last time you were out in nature and you were just struck by this wonderful view that made time feel like it stopped and everything was good, and you feel some very genuine happiness out of just being out there looking at this view. If you got your memory, hold on to it. Now open your eyes. And let's talk about that experience. So when we are out there looking at the rainbow, we're usually just taking it all in as it is. And because of that, we hold space for ourselves to enjoy this moment and then just be purely happy about it. We're usually not doing some thoughts regarding, if the rainbow was a little bit wider, maybe it would be better. Oh, maybe if the rainbow moved a little bit to the left, then it would be framed better between the mountains, right? We're just not doing that. And so what's happening here? And this genuine feeling of happiness, of joy, of connection to God, to the beauty of His creation, happens because we're taking it as it is, and there's 100% full acceptance of what's going on. So sometimes when we're working with these multicultural communities, there's something going on when there's this underlying thought of, if only they were a little bit more, if only the Hispanics were more, if they would do this instead of this, right? And that works against us as leaderships in the community, and it works against them for blossoming within our community. So every icon has a challenge, and the challenge linked to the rainbow, I would like to invite you not only to accept, fully accept every single one of the multicultures that you have in your community, that God chose for you to have in your community. I would challenge you to take it one step further and lean into that community. So schedule at least once a month a meal with one family from another culture. If there's a specific culture that you're struggling to understand how they behave, why they behave that way, they're making some logistics difficult for you, which happens. So then you would need to go and have a meal with that culture, that family, more often, maybe once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. So I hope you take this challenge, and just remember, every time you think, oh, I wish the Hispanic community was more blank, just remember, first, take a deep breath, accept as it is, lean into the culture, and then extract from the culture what serves you to fulfill your goals as parish leadership. I'm going to give you a short example of this experience. For me last year, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I was working with this parish, and I was encouraging people to ask for RSVPs for the receptions for the Ignite Capital campaign. And I had a big committee, and they pretty much unanimously said, we cannot say that we have to RSVP, otherwise they will not come. And, you know, they gave me a little bit of a pushback, and I said again, well, you know, this is how we do it all over. This is what works. Let's try it. Let's try and see if it works. And they really told me, if people feel that they have to RSVP and they don't, then they will not come at all. So against my every cell in my body was telling me that we need to stick to the plan and follow that RSVP thing, I decided to let go and just say, okay, God, you know this community better. They know their community better. If they say it's gonna work better with no RSVP, okay, I'm gonna let go. And as they were planning on the food, for example, they were planning how many items they were gonna bring. Each person was gonna buy something different, etc. I was just thinking, what are we going to do with all this food if we don't have any RSVPs and people are not coming? And then when the event happened, we had about 40 or 50 families show up. It was a very big event in the school's gym, and we had just big round tables, very festive. We had some Hispanic religious music going on, and it turned out to be a success. So sometimes we just need to accept it as it is and go with it. And sometimes they're gonna surprise us. For the second image, this is just very simple. This is another insight. I was thinking, if we were to say that the cultures are water, and we would choose different ways for water to behave, I would say the Hispanic community would be like a rain falling from the sky. And the Anglo community could be like a lake or a river, very focused, more calm. I can see how sometimes we, the Hispanic community, are a little bit more, louder, a bit more dispersed. And when I was 19, I volunteered for a Catholic boarding school. And these were girls from all over Latin America, from Chile to Mexico, Venezuela. We even had some Spanish girls, and we had this 50 girls group that would go out on outings. And I really noticed when, the Irish people would just cross the street because they didn't want to be around us because we were too loud. And so, well, some traits of the culture as it is. But the important part thing is that you as leaders will be as this hose that is going to bring the water towards one particular end. And it doesn't really matter if the water comes from the rain, or it comes from a lake, or it comes from a river, as long as you point them in the right direction, which ultimately would be Jesus, their love for Jesus, right? So the challenge for this icon would be name your year. 2020, this is the year where the Hispanic community will participate 15% more in our ministry meetings, for example. Or I can give you so many examples. You choose it. Just make sure that you behave as that host that is just shaping them and walking with them and taking them into that path of faith. And for the third icon, this is something that I have experienced in different communities, that sometimes we're coming from a place of judgment when we are trying to serve the Hispanic community, because, we, as human beings, we naturally tend to judge or label things that are different in general. So I want you to think about one person in your life with whom you can be 100% yourself. You can tell that person your stories, your adventures, your dreams, and you never feel judged. You just feel supported. And think about how you behave around that person. Now take a person with the opposite behavior. Think of one person in your life that every time you tell them a dream, a hope, a plan, an adventure, something from work, it would constantly interrupt you to say, you should have done this. You could have done this better. If I were you, I would do this, right? And think about how you behave when they're acting like that. How confident you feel in telling them more about your day or more about your experience. So sometimes we're behaving like that person with the Hispanic community in America. And I would really encourage you to just adjust, if you need, the way you are encountering with the Hispanic community. And the key point here will be just listen over speaking. There's nothing to fix. They are the way they are for a reason. They are part of the community for a reason. And the challenge here is take your to-do list, break it into two: the could do and the should do. The should do will be only 20% of your total list. And then from that should do, choose one thing that you're gonna do to make the Hispanic community in your community feel more welcomed and less judged, and share that with your team. That's it for the challenges for today. I'm gonna leave it to Luis to continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elisa. And I thank you all, the three panelists today, for their time, and as well as all the attendees for taking the time of their day to join us. If you hadn't had the chance to do so, please type in your question. We have received a few during the webinar so far. So I'm going to invite you over take the next minute or so to type in your question. But let's start off here with one that I did invite José de Jesus to review the brochure, because during that section I thought it was just on my end here that had a bad connection, but it appears from feedback we received that a lot of people missed when you referenced the two brochures. So if you can take a moment just to review that, comparing the differences between the brochures again.
Thank you, Louis. Yeah, part of the problem is that it's actually a good problem. We have a lot of people on the webinar, much more than we expected, which is actually a great thing for us. So I guess that's kind of tripping up our internet connection throughout. Good problem, technical issues, it is what it is. But just in general, my point with the two brochures that I showed, that I referenced before, one is smaller, and that was the Spanish brochure. The English brochure was much bigger. And it's just to be careful with the message that we're sending out, and not to make the return on investment in particular the most important part of your decision in terms of how you promote your case and how you promote your messaging. I'm not saying that economics shouldn't play any part, because obviously money is a limited commodity, but it's important that this shouldn't be the most important thing. And that was my point with it. If you begin with the end in mind, then the idea is to think long-term. We're development people, and so development is a process. Stewardship is a process, and by having a large brochure, a small brochure, one that's in color, one that's black and white, it's sending the wrong message to our people. We want to make sure that when somebody picks it up, even if they pick it up on the street, that it's very clear that I'm important, and that somebody thinks I'm important somewhere.
Great, thank you, Jose. On that same topic, we have here a question. If you had experience working with a parish that has used both an English and Spanish bulletin, and touch a little bit about the costs, if you had any idea if there's some associated costs with that.
And I can take this, Jose, since I think that's more geared towards the bulletin point that I made earlier. And that's a great question, and we have had a lot of parishes that have done this. I know another question was, can we see an example? And surely we can provide an example as we communicate further after the webinar. So I've got, right off the top of the head, I've got two examples from parishes that I've worked with in the last year, last 6 months, actually. Where one has taken some of the English content and reformatted the bulletin to better fit these ideas. So shortened English. And the other one is where the English bulletin is shorter and the Spanish bulletin comes from the parish office. So the Spanish bulletin is made from, there with the employees and the Hispanic ministries, and everyone has their say as to what they have. So they had a different meeting as to what's the most important thing in our community that we should include in our bulletin, and the parish produced it itself. Along with those lines, we have to remember, and much like José de Jesus said earlier, if we give more importance to the economical over the ministry, we might get into trouble. And I realize these are, great questions, and it is a concern at the parish level. So we must be sensitive to the reaction of parishioners. So here's an idea. Maybe we try it for 2 months. Maybe we give this idea a trial period and see how our community reacts. At the end of the day, we need to be willing to risk changing our ways. And we should no longer be saying, we do this because we've been doing it for 10 years or 20 or 5 or 2 years, and it works with our budget. We have to be willing to take that little extra step or extra risk, even if it's going to hurt us in the short term, because I guarantee you, the Spanish community or the Korean community, whatever multicultural community, will thank you for making an effort to better include them with your communication.
Thanks, Jose. This one's for Elisa. Do you think you can use the same approach you use to engage the Latino community to engage other ethnic groups?
Thank you, Luis. Well, I think there's two parts to this question. And there's just something within every human being that we respond to a powerful why. So if we start our communication with a powerful why and it's coming from there, then people are going to join us in whatever mission we're trying to fulfill. Because they're not going to sign up for what we're doing. They're going to sign up because they believe what we believe. So if we're trying to reach out to the whole community, make sure you start with the powerful why for that project, for that intention, for that idea, for that ministry group, etc. And then to tailor in a more personalized ways to different communities, the most important thing is just paying attention to what's going on in that culture, locate what's working for them, and just replicate that. Where are they meeting? How are they meeting? What are the communication systems they're using? What are they good at? How can we just make them blossom? So it's really not, it's not about complexity. It's not very complex. We don't need to invent anything new. We as parish leadership, we just need to lean into the culture, pay attention, and then replicate whatever is working within that culture.
Thanks, Elisa. All right, this one is for you, Jose de Jesus, especially because you discussed stereotypes. So we have a development director who asked, they've been informed throughout their whole career that the Hispanic community doesn't like to give away their information. So what would you advise the development director to say if he's constantly being told that?
It's very interesting. It's funny, you know, you go to supermarkets these days, right? And you bring, where's my keys? My keys have a little coupon next to them that say Stop and Shop, right? And of course, our supermarkets use that to market, and we get a benefit out of that, right? We get a benefit or some kind of discount. And we tend to give away our email addresses, and we tend to give away our even our cell phones. It's no wonder why WhatsApp is the second largest social media and even communication device around the world, just right below Facebook. So it's not really about surrendering the information, right? When you have 1.7 billion people signing on to Facebook a month, and so many of them are Latinos. So I think that in general, it's just the way that we approach asking for information. So if you notice when Jose talked about his, the Stay Connected card that we use, we're not asking people to register. We're not asking people to make some kind of commitment to the parish. What we are asking people to do is to do something that they normally do anyway, which is to stay connected as a familia. And if that's the promise, and we're able to own that promise and able to deliver on that promise, then it becomes easier for people to become more connected to the parish. At the end of the day, do we want to have a registered parishioner base who doesn't show up in church, or do we want to have a group of people who are connected via Stay Connected or some other kind of media that is actually connected, that are actually part of the family? So again, examine what the intention is, all right? The idea of being part of an institution, as I referenced in my initial comments, we're very skeptical as a people about institutions in general. It's no wonder why we have so many dictatorships in South America and Central America in particular, right? So we have to be careful with what we're actually offering, all right? It's not about registering as much as it is about connecting.
Thanks, Jose. The next one here is for Jose Felix. You mentioned the church reaching out to parishioners, and from working with many churches throughout my career, I know that some of them, it's impossible due to staffing. Do you think they could recruit possibly a volunteer committee to help them with that?
Absolutely. You know, a volunteer group would probably be better. You know, a lot of these parishes, not a lot, but some do have secretaries or business personnel or parish office personnel staff that don't speak Spanish. So it'll be hard to ask that one person that does to make all the phone calls, right? So if volunteers are recommended, I strongly suggest it, and it's better. It's just a more natural process when they're having their conversations. I would even look for volunteers within the ministries themselves already, because these are people that are already spotlighted by the parishioners, right? These are people that our parishioners will recognize, hey, he's in this ministry, or hey, he's the Knights of Columbus, or I always see him with the collection basket at Mass. And that gives, more of a sense of comfortability to the parishioner when they're talking to the person, when they are giving their information away. It is a daunting task when you think of it, as far as logistics. But when you ask for help, and this is true in all things with our faith, you're going to be surprised with how many people are going to want to help you. So please ask for help. Stay connected within your own community and within your own ministries, because people just want to help. And if we open that door, the floodgates of help are going to come in. But thank you for that question. That's a great question.
Thanks, Jose. All right, the next one's for you, Elisa. In the Hispanic community, we always hear that they're not going to pledge, especially us being fundraisers. When you hear that often from leadership, how do you combat that statement?
Okay, so there's part of truth to that statement, because there's something that has been happening. And what comes to my mind when people say that Hispanics don't pledge or don't give is this memory when there was the earthquake in Mexico City, and I had the opportunity to work with the Red Cross as a volunteer. And I would see just like, hundreds and hundreds of people rushing to the center to give all the items that they had purchased for the survivors and for the aid. All these grocery carts just piling up in the street, so much people just pouring their hearts in help. So yes, maybe there has been a time where people has not pledged, but just keep in mind that there's, other times where people just over pledge, over give, over deliver when it comes to being generous. And for the Hispanic community, it's usually when it comes from the heart. So when I speak to the Hispanic community in receptions for capital campaigns, I make sure that I come from a place where I can relate to them in an emotional way. And then I would make sure when I'm speaking to the Anglo community to go into the practical way. I will just make sure to speak in their terms. And for the past, since 2018, I've been working with communities that are heavily Hispanic, and we have been reaching goal. I think it's just going back to that powerful why, to speaking in their language and to doing it with an open heart, as with the intention not to raise money, but the intention to open an opportunity for them to express their generosity. And it works every time, at least for me, when I present it in this way. This is an opportunity for us to come together as a community. This is an opportunity for us to express how grateful we are for all the things that God has given us in our life. And when you just lay things very simple, very clear, very transparent, and in their language, they always respond. I had this couple of very elder Hispanic people, or Hispanic looking people at least. They didn't know how to write. And when we finished the reception, I was so humbled and so surprised in a good way. They were very, very old. They were wearing all these clothes from, like, I don't know, a specific part of Mexico that has, these special robes and these special skirts. And the gentleman was wearing a hat and white hair. And they each gave a separate pledge. I was so overwhelmed and so happy. They didn't even know how to write, and they they pledged 2 pledges per family. They came to me and they asked me, can you please write what we want to pledge? So it's just a matter of connecting, just a matter of offering that opportunity to give.
Can I just add one more thing to that, if you want, just very briefly?
Sure.
As we're designing our materials, it's important, if you begin with the end in mind, right, that you offer not just a 36-month plan for your donors. They might not be there 6 months from now. So right from the beginning, it's important to state the intention. And also, as we're presenting the campaign pledge process itself, let people know the importance that it's better to be able to honor that pledge. So as you make your pledge, consider a pledge that you're going to be able to honor and going to be able to do, rather than pledge for 3 years or 4 years and feel good about this for the moment. But at the end of the day, if you're not honoring it, then our finance people, our councils can't count on that. So let's state the intention and help them to live that intention right from the beginning by designing quality and good materials.
Thanks, Jose. All right, here's for the final question. Unfortunately, we didn't get to everyone's question, but I want to thank everyone for participating. If we didn't get to answer your question today, you're going to be on the lookout. We're going to send you an email with the recording of this webinar. Please respond to that email with all your questions, and we are going to make sure that we get back to you right away with an answer. All right, so for the last question here, let's see right here. It's a loaded question, so I'm going to invite both Jose's to answer this. Can you describe the ways in which cultural differences between the Anglo and the Hispanic communities may differ on how they worship and how they support the church?
I'll just jump right in with the worship. Obviously, there's so much. I'm a liturgical musician in my parish. I've been in this for a long time, and there's just so much to talk about with that. Just in particular, our styles, our religiosity, our cultures are so different in how we worship. Our music is such a part of who we are. Our faith is woven even into our language. So I think and so one of the things that I do to get a real sense of a parish when I come in to talk to the leadership is I ask the pastor and the community, how do you celebrate the Triduum? What does that look like? And that really gives me an insight into the prayer life of that parish. All right, where my father used to say, if you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. So we do Eucharist, we do church. So the way that we do church really informs me about how that church is alive and what it does and how they worship. And so I look at the Triduum because that's the high point of our liturgy, of our year. And I've been in churches where they have 2 Holy Thursday celebrations or 2 Easter vigils. And that informs me. It says something about the people. It says something about the capacity for bilingualism in that particular parish. And it helps me to design and work with that parish in particular. Again, I'm being very generic, but I think hopefully that metaphor gives you a good sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it, Jose. Yeah, I grew up in a household, just like many, Mexican families, where religion is at the forefront of what you do. You don't really plan activities outside of the church. Your activities are the church. So if we have that mindset, right, and I'm going to try to answer a question with that as well, because I saw it pop up there at the end, but I'm not going to dig too deep into it just to respect everyone's time and for everyone to take the poll at the end as well. But having said that, with all these activities and events, that's where we are able to generate the budgets that we do with the Hispanic community, right? Because we know that these events and kermeses and parties, those are what we raise money in. So how do we do that, and how do we adapt to the current challenging times? One answer to that, one of many answers, because it's also a very loaded question, I think, would be to reach out to them, and just like Jose de Jesus said earlier, where they are. Right now, there's a lot of Facebook groups and a lot of parishes that are focusing their attention into social media. And believe it or not, people might not have a bank account, but they have a smartphone, in our communities, because that smartphone allows them to contact their family out in Mexico. Talk about a WhatsApp that has blown up in the US mainly because of immigrants. right? So if we focus our attention to where they are, and right now it's social media and praying and seeing mass, live streaming mass adoration, and try to make sense of what is going on at the parish level, try to demonstrate the challenges, make it transparent enough so that people know that your parish still needs your support. And seeing where they are at that moment, we'll be able to better adjust our plan and have maybe a one-on-one conversations with certain families. But it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more organic to connect with our Hispanic communities through social media now more than before.
Thanks, Jose. I'm going to remind everyone to please stick around at the end. We're going to ask everyone to help us decide the next webinar, the future webinar. And also to let you all know that in the future webinars, we're going to share a lot more details than we did with you today in regards to many approaches that we have to share with our experience in fundraising. So I'm going to turn it over to Jose de Jesus for him to share a few takeaways.
Just a closing comment again. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, everybody on our panel today. But thank you all participants for being with us. Again, we were just looking at a 30,000 feet down view of what we're trying to do, and hopefully to inform your paradigms and your stereotypes in general to help us be better at what we do in our jobs. So as we open with prayer, I just want to close with this simple reflection for us and to kind of reinforce this idea of translating and translation and why it's not always the best and the most ideal place to start. So when we look at scripture, we look at the last, the Gospel of John, and in the last chapter, you have the very famous discussion between Peter and Jesus, right? Jesus asks Peter, do you love me, right? And again, this is the last time that Jesus asked Peter, he says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you, right? Jesus said to him, feed my sheep, right? And oftentimes we think, well, scripture, for a long time, I thought all Spanish scripture was just translated from the English, growing up. I said, well, no, thank God it's not, right? At least in this part of the scripture, it comes from the Greek. And it's so much richer for me to appreciate what he says. Because in Spanish, it's not feed my sheep, it's apacienta mis ovejas. And the word apacienta comes from the Latin pax, which means peace, right? Pax hominibus. Apacienta in Spanish is a different word, it's a different sense. It doesn't mean feed my sheep, it means, apacienta means like a mom holding her baby and to make that baby feel at ease, to feel at peace as a mother caring for her baby. And so in essence, what I'm trying to say is when we begin with the end in mind, you avoid the translating of any of the language because, as I said before, some things are truly beyond translation and some things really do get lost in the translating. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. We hope that you were able to get something out of this. And again, thank our panelists for being with us today. We're going to be sending out those emails. Please be sure and respond so that we're able to answer your questions and be on the lookout for our upcoming webinar. We're going to try to see if we can keep these coming. So again, thank you so much. God bless you guys wherever you are and have a wonderful day.